Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's really wonderful to see so many faces across so many networks, research collaborators, students, alumni, colleagues, members of the Karantina community, and visitors. So thank you all for coming. It really gives me a great pleasure to share with you the research project that we have been conducting in the Beirut Urban Lab over the past 2 years that was triggered by the blast of 2020 and called Urban Recovery Strategy for Post-Blast Karantina. I want to thank all the team members who contributed to this work. Some of them are here in the room, some could not be with us today, either engaged in other projects or just delivered a baby, like Batul, who was with us from day one on this project. So their names are on the board. We also have researchers from the local community who contributed tremendously to this work. So I want to start by thanking them and presenting on their behalf this project. This is not certainly a project I did on my own. I had a great team and great support and great collaborators and funders and donors and everything. So the project, yes, was in response to the Beirut port blast, which I will not go into the details of. You know the details of the blast. We all lived through that trauma, and many neighborhoods were impacted. Actually, today I will go through all the steps of the project, so it will be more of an overview of the process rather than digging into the details along the way, but I'm happy to discuss later all the details with you. I'm also planning to conduct smaller workshops to present the action plans and putting them up for adoption. So I'm happy to talk in greater detail, but today is really to take you through the whole process of the project and our main findings and deliverables. So the Beirut Urban Lab mobilized after the blast and in response to it with a full team of directors and researchers. And for those of you who don't know, the Beirut Urban Lab is introduced here briefly. It's a collaborative and interdisciplinary research space within the Department of Architecture and Design at AUB. Many of its researchers occupy themselves across multiple themes, but these are 4 of the main themes, and urban recovery features as one of the main themes that we work on at the Beirut Urban Lab across different scales and sites. So the Karantina project is based on that and based on our reservoir of experience with post-war reconstruction, post-disaster reconstruction, from our engagement with the results of the Beirut reconstruction after the civil war, critical engagement with it, then actual field engagement post-2006 war in the south and in Har Tahrik, as well as many projects outside Lebanon, such as Aleppo in Syria and Erbil in Iraq, in which I played a role as well. So we also based this intervention on a lot of theoretical reflections and case study reflections across the years from 2006 on, when we got together as a small group of people in the reconstruction unit at AUB to tackle the aftermath of the 2006 Israeli attacks on many of the villages in the south and on Beirut. And we distributed ourselves across different groups and intervened in different sites. Then we got together and published whether the pamphlet on Har Tahrik or the edited volume on lessons in post-war about our experience, about our role also as facilitators, advocators, planners, designers in tackling such sites. Many years later, we also reflected on a shift from reconstruction to recovery as a more holistic approach that's social, economic, and spatial, while it deals with power relations, displacement, and this was a volume called Urban Recovery at the intersection of displacement and post-war reconstruction that came out of City Debates 2019. Many of you were there. So these reflections kind of gave us the theoretical backing and the case study backing that allowed us to formulate a position within the lab regarding urban recovery, which we conceptualize as a process really triggered by many different ruptures, not only wars and conflicts and natural disasters, but even planning acts of rupture, such as the erasure that took place in downtown Beirut. So we don't think of it as a product nor as a post condition of any kind. Our position, thinks of it as rather a process of reconfiguration that tackles all urban vulnerabilities and injustices that accumulated over time, even before the time of the blast or the disaster or the war. It tackles the spatial, the social, the cultural, but even the imaginative. With the Syrian refugees, I worked a lot on their imagined recovery of their places in Syria where they came from. So also the imagined is a really important place to dwell as a formula for recovery. So there we adopt an approach, therefore, that is bottom-up, participatory, socially just and inclusive. In our projects, if we are to go with interventions, we make them people-centered, heritage-led, and place-specific. This is the kind of proposition or the intellectual position that we came in with. And it was a challenge to apply it to the context of post-blast Karantina or any other site. So we applied for a grant collectively as a lab from the IDRC, a Canadian grant, to work across multiple projects of different scales, from the Observatory of Reconstruction to the Neighborhood Recovery Project to Visioning the City. Today I will share the second one, and as applied to Karantina. And I'm not going to focus on the other wonderful projects that my colleagues are leading in the Beirut Urban Lab. To focus on Karantina, which is one of the neighborhoods that were heavily impacted by the blast, it was only 600 meters from the epicenter and suffered a great deal and was subjected yet again, one more time, to displacement, eviction, demolitions, reconstruction, and so on, which exacerbated all the vulnerabilities that existed from the Civil War onwards. And I will tell you a little bit about Karantina as we move forward. So we integrated the position and the approach of BUL to Karantina. And in order to really go through a people-centered, participatory, and socially just project, we had to look for models of intervention or study that have the participatory and sustainable component to them. So we adopted the CDS model and combined it with the citizen scientist model as an experimentation. This was not really done much elsewhere and was definitely not done in Lebanon. The CDS model is a European model for city sustainable development strategy, which was started in Barcelona and was widespread in Mediterranean cities. It was applied as a study to Saida in Lebanon in 2013 by a team from AUB, of which I was part. But here the CDS had to be adapted to recovery as opposed to development, and had to be adapted to the scale of the neighborhood as opposed to the city. We combined it with the citizen scientist method, which is to train and engage local researchers from the area as one of the dimensions of the participatory model. And I will introduce these two before I go into the details of how we implemented them. What is a CDS, or City Development Strategy? Some people call it USUDS. It's a sustainable development strategy. It's a framework that replaces the rigid master plans by a flexible strategic framework that analyzes strategic issues and proposes strategic projects that have an impact and that incrementally, if implemented, translate the vision which is crafted by the community. So it's iterative, it's flexible, it's incrementally phased over time. And this methodology has very clear 5 steps that start with the descriptive memory, or what some of us call neighborhood profile. From that profile, we identify or extract what we call transversal issues or cross-cutting issues that we then analyze in depth. So it's not a comprehensive study, it's very strategic by pulling the strategic issues first and then responding them equally in a strategic fashion. The second step goes through an in-depth analysis of these 5 issues that we extracted in the case of Karantina, and its deliverable is the findings of the analysis, but also the vision of the community. In parallel with the diagnosis, we work with the community on crafting a shared vision. The third step is about designing that strategic framework, which is a combination of general goals, strategic objectives, and strategies to achieve these goals, then complemented at the end by a bunch of action plans that translate the vision and the strategies on the ground. This is followed by a 5th and a final step, which is about indicator system, because this kind of work does not end with recommending action plans or even implementing them. There is a need for a monitoring system, evaluation system, a system that responds to these action plans on the ground and then even recraft them. It's a flexible framework that should be monitored long term and adapted as one moves through. So it's very important to have a custodian of that study, which I will talk about at the very end. So we combined that because we felt that in Lebanon we need to experiment with multiple modalities to replace the vacuum created in the absence of a government position or strategy for recovery. The CS training, or the citizen scientists, are local researchers that we train, we select, recruit, and train, and integrate into this 5-step process throughout. This is first to enable them to learn research skills, but also to offer them a voice. And also it's a form of engaging the community. I will go through these different steps later, but part of setting up the project was really putting a roadmap for us, because we understand this as a project that's long-term. It was done over 2 years. What you see are the 5 steps. At the bottom are all the deliverables. At the top are the different collaborative stunts or interventions or things we did along the way with different partners. We did part of the early work and the focus groups with UNDP. We did a spatial intervention with ACTED and UCL. We did a physical rehabilitation of streets with NRC and so on. So along the way, we also built partnerships and we worked with different peoples on different fronts. And of course, all of this was backed up by the IDRC funding in the first place. So I'll take you through these steps rather quickly, and I hope I will try to finish in a short time so we can have a discussion. Setting up the project was really mainly about observing what's going on in the ground. This started in August, 5th. We went to the grounds, observed what's going on, understood the extent of the damage. We also established entry points with the community, talked to a lot of people, heard their perspectives, their needs. But at the same time, we identified and coordinated with the actors on the ground. There were many people, as you know or can imagine, who flooded the street of the impacted neighborhoods to help out. So in August, we started the coordination process that was later continued by other agencies such as UNDP and UN Habitat. But it was very important for us to connect with these people at the beginning, understand what they do so that we avoid duplication and we coordinate. Of course, 85% of these actors on the ground were doing humanitarian and emergency relief, which was short term. We were looking for people who are that 10-15% who are interested in long-term sustainable interventions to partner with, to collaborate, to talk to, and so on. And that's what happened through this filtering process. Then we moved really to the key steps of the project, starting with the neighborhood profile, which was part of profiling 6 neighborhoods that were impacted by the blast. as we were commissioned by UNHCR and acted to do these. Karantina was one of them, and we used it as the first building block for the CDS intervention in the neighborhood scale. These had clear structures around neighborhood indicators that go through the area, its urbanization history, socioeconomic profiles, housing conditions, and ends with recommendations after assessment of the recovery. We, of course, conducted preliminary data to profile Karantina very quickly so that we can go into identifying the transversal issues. This was not the in-depth study. Through informal conversations, interviews, field work, documentation, mapping, photo surveys of the damaged buildings, narrative buildings. We talked to a lot of people, pulled the themes that they talk about: displacement, recovery, the damage of the port and how it affected businesses, landlords, residents, tension, and so on. This gave us an overall profile of Karantina, which is, as you know, is a very interesting low-income mixed community. At the outset, you know, Karantina is a site that has hosted refugees throughout its history, from Kurdish to Palestinian to Armenian refugees. It's really a host community. It's a mixed community between Syrian, Lebanese migrant workers, Lebanese from different backgrounds, but amidst that mix, you begin to see that they actually diverse groups, but exist within enclaves of sub-neighborhoods. They don't really mix as the overall statistics show. So you have a Sayyida neighborhood, which is mostly Christian Lebanese. You have Al-Khudr, which is mostly Arab al-Maslak Sunni, who host the Syrian communities, and so on. I will try to move quickly, but it was very clear early on from even the preliminary findings showed that Karantina suffers from a history, and we were looking for trends, of course, because we, again, as I said, we look for vulnerabilities and injustices that existed before the blast and were simply exacerbated by the blast, because if you want to do a recovery, you don't want to address the blast, but you want to address the accumulation of these problems and vulnerabilities. So Karantina suffers from a history of militarization that started with the Civil War and continued to grow. Many public and privately owned lands are occupied by the military. It also has a sort of intensified threat to its businesses, especially the businesses that relate to the port. It suffers from marginalization. You know, it is stigmatized in the mind of many residents of Beirut, being a site of quarantine, a site of massacres during the Civil War. Already there is a kind of mental stigma associated with it. It suffers from segregation by infrastructural breaks. So there is this disconnect that is social and spatial that came through. Also, it suffered from rent hikes and evictions and displacement, which is common to a post-blast process, but also that was part of the history of the place as a site of multiple traumas. I really describe Karantina as a site of multiple traumas. It suffered so many traumas and never really received adequate and fair share of its development or upgrade. Finally, it has serious environmental threats, you know, being a site of dumping ground, bad infrastructure, sewage problems, various toxic sources of pollution, and the landfill that exists on its edge. So these came through as the initial problems, if you want, sharp cumulative problems and trends around which we designed the 5 transversal issues for the diagnosis phase, which are affordable housing and inclusivity, social, economic, spatial connectivity, the cultural and economic vitality, inclusive and sustainable development, and finally, the quality of the urban environment. These are cross-cutting issues that are meant to be seen not through sectors, but really as phenomena that are social, economic, political, and so on. So we combine diversity with affordable housing, cultural and economic, and so on. And as you will see, the cross-cutting will then produce strategies that talk to each other and translate through the same action plans, right, that respond to multiple strategies. The strategic diagnosis could not have happened through an expert-oriented process. The diagnosis happened through a very strong program for community engagement that came in multiple forms of engagement, through the training of the citizen scientists, engaging them in the research and the diagnosis and the implementation, through engaging the community with surveys and interviews and conversations and calls and WhatsApps and what have you, through town hall meetings of large scale that took place in the municipal park, because we wanted again for our action to revive some of these important public spaces that are actually closed and fenced and not opened by the municipality for the community. So our events being held there allows the community to come in these spaces. We also did thematic focus groups organized by in collaboration with UNDP for the transversal issues. So when we talked about housing, we invited landlords and tenants, and when we talked about micro businesses, we also invited business owners and so on. Finally, we also did a fifth modality for community engagement, which is around the spatial intervention that we did in parallel and co-designing workshops. I'll give you an idea about each. The citizen scientist training happened at AUB. We recruited, of course, a diverse group of citizen scientists. Some of them are here in this room today. And we tried to make them as representative of the community as possible across gender, nationality, age, and education background and occupation. And 12 of them got trained. 11 stayed throughout the project. Some have now traveled, and some still work with us. They went through a 2-day workshop around research methods, research ethics, skills to read maps, to use digital tools, and what have you, then followed by fieldwork training with our own researchers who went with them to conduct surveys, household surveys, business surveys in the area. The second form was town hall meetings. These were open public invitations for all residents in Karantina that came to these multiple meetings through which we crafted a vision. The first session was for them to talk to us about what they think are the major problems. The second session was what are the major proposals, what are the needs. The third was around crafting a vision. And of course, we did all of this in Arabic as a language, and we used their own terminology. So I would love to just stop and read their vision for post-blast Karantina as a منطقة استراتيجية متطورة ومزدهرة اقتصاديا، منطقة مجتمعها متمكن ومترابط، تكون سهلة الوصول ومنظمة عمرانيا ونظيفة بيئيا، تتوفر فيها خدمات ملائمة وسكن لائق ومساحات عامة ومشتركة. So you can see the intersections with the transversal issues that our own preliminary profile came up with. They completely intersect. Right? So they do talk about accessibility and transportation. They talk about the environmental quality of the space, the open space network, services, and adequate housing. They really talk a lot about السكن اللائق. So it was very good for us to test and cross-reference the transversal issues by what the key words that came through the vision crafted by the community. The transversal issues were then taken to a greater in-depth discussion through the third modality of engaging the community, which is the thematic focus discussions. And finally, the spatial intervention. I am a big believer that shared spaces of significance and shared memory are very important catalysts for recovery. They are good entry points. I'm also a strong believer that long-term projects, given the survey fatigue and the multiple actors and engaging the residents on so many different things, need to be anchored in some tangible result, right? So in parallel to this whole process, we opted to do a spatial intervention That's a community space of shared memory and significance, through which we do co-designing workshops with the community. So on the one hand, it's another form of community engagement. On the other, there is a material, tangible result that comes through that builds trust with the community that we are serious, we're here to stay, and this is a long-term process. Of course, none of this comes with no challenges or difficulties or factors of success and failure. I can reflect on some of these challenges, but I'll go through the process first. So we started, of course, because we believe in the importance of public shared spaces. We did a mapping of the socio-spatial practices by different user groups, and we mapped them, and we did the heat map to identify what is a space that is mostly used by a great diversity of groups. But then we decided to focus on Al-Khudr area because it's one of the densest, most deprived sub-neighborhood, especially that our colleagues in Farah al-Ata were working on a Sayyida area. So we thought Al-Khudr, people who kept saying no one came here, no one helped us, we thought we would engage them in designing their most important social space. So they selected the space with us. They called it Qalb al-Hay. They talked about Sahat al-Khudr as Sahat al-Ilfi. It's where we all come together, have coffee, play chess, play tawle, do subhiyas, etc. So they told us that this is the space that is meaningful. One young man told me, I stay here more than I sit in my own living room. So we decided to work with them on a proposition. We asked them to draw their mental maps of what the space should be, what are the different activities that took place, came back with models and drawings, and engaged them in, I think, 3 co-designing workshops before finalizing the design and putting it through implementation. And again, I want to say the implementation project also involved the community. We had already a list of the skilled and the non-skilled workers in the area, so we made it a condition with Acted, who was the funder of this project, the contractor, to hire a quota from the local workers. So they engaged in the project itself and its implementation, and these are just quick photos of the before and after, and how this space became, again, well furnished, well lit. They spoke a lot about the need for lighting, and because that's important for security, for walking in the dark streets. So they were very happy to see that these spaces were made lit, were planted with trees, had urban furniture, but most importantly, we also applied inclusive design guidelines that were given to us in collaboration with Dr. Aitab Shuaib. I hope I'm mentioning all the people who contributed. I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot, but it was a web of collaborators on this site. We worked with recycled material for the urban furniture, recycled from the rubble of the blast. So there's also kind of an hidden layer of that. So all of this community engagement and the different models were a source for the diagnosis process of these 5, which I'm going to go quickly through their findings. I really cannot go into the fine grain of these in-depth studies, but I want to give you glimpses of the major findings of the different cross-cutting issues. For affordable housing, of course, we found out that the people who are already low-income groups are finding it less and less affordable. They were spending more than 30% of their income, while they have 70% unemployment, and while they don't have multiple sources of funding, and while 73 of them are tenants threatened and actually living through informal contracts. Very complex situation to tackle. Of course, they talked a lot, and what emerged from the surveys and the observations, lack of public services. There were no schools in Karantina. There was one a long time ago. There's one now, but before the blast and after, there was no public school in Karantina. They had to walk distances to take their kids to school. There were no services such as family clinics, community centers, etc. Anyway, but there was also the issue of these enclaved sub-neighborhoods, that create fragmented communities within Karantina that were very important to understand. There was tension between the Syrian refugees and the Lebanese residents. There was tension between the different sub-neighborhoods, and so on. The informal practices were also a source for the ease. Already 30 minutes? Okay, I'll go quickly. All right. Social economic connectivity, again, one of the important findings is that Karantina is marginalized, enclaved by superhighways and militarized restrictions of access to many. There were not pedestrian walkways everywhere. Now there is with the ILO intervention, etc. The third one was the inclusive and sustainable development. Again, there was a general economic decline before the blast due to the economic situation, financial crisis, a revolution, and then the blast. This was all exacerbated by job losses. And even before that, the closure of the main economic drivers, I call them economic drivers. The slaughterhouse was closed and reopened and was closed. And the slaughterhouse was a very important economic engine. The port was a very important economic driver. And its explosion, of course, shut down many businesses. The public market also was closed way before the blast. So there was a trend, of course, of this decline. The craft manufacturers, which constitute an important part of the heritage of the place, were also threatened. And these are some of the businesses there that have been subjected to shutting down and closing and losing employees and so on. Finally, inclusive and sustainable development. There are many measures that have blocked the development of Karantina. After all the different traumas that it went through, there was never a program. The military occupation of private as well as public land hindered that. Many proposed but unfinished projects like the Lenore project put many lands on hold. There are small plots of lands that are unbuildable that are also on hold and not developable. So there were many factors that caused the freeze of development in Karantina as well. I'll just go quickly. The quality of the urban environment, the findings are very clear to many of you. Of course, there are sources of pollution. The Karantina became even the dumping ground for the debris from the blast. Yani, it was the backyard of the city, continued to be the backyard of the city throughout the blast, and that affected really the socio-spatial practices that existed there, the feeling of unsafe and unsecure spaces because of the militarization and so on. So these were the findings that we took to designing the strategic framework. We worked back and forth. It's not such a linear process. When we write action plans, we realize that the strategies don't quite work and we work backwards. So this was an iterative process and not really a linear process. The main grand or general objectives are protecting and increasing affordability of housing, strengthening socio-cultural, economic and spatial connectivity, supporting and sustaining cultural and economic vitality, promoting a sustainable and participatory development model, and improving the quality of the urban. These are the grand objectives, which we then broke down, and I will not go through all of these. This is really about the process, again, not about the fine grain. Each one was broken down into strategic objectives that sometimes talk to each other. Sometimes they're repeated, because if you say, I want to increase source of income, right, or decrease unemployment, you're automatically dealing with affordability of housing. So some strategies worked across because this was transversal. So these strategic objectives were then matched by strategies, because it's not enough to have a strategic goal. You have to have a strategy of how to get there and translate that into action plans. The color code that you see here is the coded words, the keywords from the vision of the community, right? So we're working in parallel. We want to translate the vision, but we want to translate the grand objectives that came out of the findings. So we made sure to code them in and see that we are actually meeting all these objectives and translating the vision at the same time. So it's a complex web of, each grand objective translated to strategic objectives and strategies. You see the numbering, the B and the D and the C, because some strategies reoccur in different places, right? Anyway, those are the 5 different, and they all work in intercrossings. As you see, they all weave into one another and feed into one another as you develop them forward. And that's the whole idea. Sorry?
You have to send it to us because we need to.
I will. This will all be posted on the BUL website. Sorry. Then we moved into translating the strategies into action plans. These action plans correspond to multiple strategies, right? That's why they ended up as 30 action plans of different types, from soft, regulatory, to advocacy, and you see the different types, and you see the distribution of the 30. We have 14 execution projects. Not all of them are physical, okay, like establishing a career and training center. We have regulatory or policy action plans. We have management and operation. We have capacity building. We have institutional setups. So they are diverse, and they're supposed to complement one another and work together. When they're all implemented, hopefully the vision will kind of translate into tangible. These are examples of some of these. I refuse to go through all of them, give you a headache, but this is one example. We wrote a concept note for each of the action plans, explaining the problematic, describing the proposed project, classifying it, quantifying the possible budget, and identifying the main stakeholders and possible donors. So we know UNOPS, who are with us today, are interested in public spaces, so we mention them. So we kind of surveyed the different actors and what type of projects they do, if they're interested in housing like UN Habitat, or in capacity building like the French city union for the municipality, then we do that. So we wrote a detailed concept note. This is a summary of it for each project. Of course, this is not carved in stone. We hope that we conduct workshops after this public meeting with interested donors and funding agencies, with the municipality and public actors, to see who would adopt these different projects. And we can always rewrite these concept notes. We can research them further, right, and do more detailed scooping of the issues. By the way, the one I'm showing you here relates to a regulatory framework that relates with the complexity of tenancy in Karantina. The community met and reviewed with us the 30 action plans. We asked them how these resonate with them. We asked them how would they prioritize them. So they prioritized 5, the ones you see there. The first one is establishing a business and career training center. So the economic condition, of course, is always a priority. And these are some of the quotes that they talked about. So this was done recently to really bring the community again into the loop. This is the project that was one of the priority projects. This is a project that is both an execution project and a capacity building project. We really, through these projects, these are the 30 projects that correspond to the vision and the strategic. I will not go through them. I will conclude because Mariam is looking at me. Here's what I want to really say. At the end of the day, we worked on transversal cross-cutting issues. We worked on a participatory sustainable strategic framework because we want to experiment with formulas of collaborative efforts towards implementation. This is not a top-heavy project, nor is it a bottom-up project. We want to experiment with a four-legged collaborative effort and consultative effort that includes the community all the time, recognizes and includes public authorities, includes donors or private investors, as well as academic research units like ourselves or professional experts. We feel that without this kind of collaborative four-legged formula, implementation will be difficult in absence of course, government overarching policies, in absence of trust with donor countries, and what have you. So I'm just going to give a final example of how we think this can happen if different people adopt the different action plans. We did one of the action plans, which is a pilot action plan. Again, you can see from the logos how collaborative this is. This is a project, which is the community center project, one of the action plans proposed, and one that was really asked by the community, led by Design for Communities, a local NGO. I wish Sarah Qattan is here, in collaboration with the D-Lab course, which is offered by Professor Karim Najjar at AUB in this department, in close coordination with the municipality who offered the land. And I'll talk about the land in a little bit, with French funding and other collaborators. So you can see the kind of web of international local NGOs working with research institutions and with the municipality to execute a project. The beauty of this project is that we were looking for a site that is accessible by all, not in the enclaved sub-neighborhoods, but also a project that kind of penetrates this huge municipal lot, which is walled and adds to the segregation of Karantina. And it's actually within that site that the municipality owns and breaks through that wall. So we also think that this is a symbolic gesture of breaking through the barriers that marginalize and segregate Karantina, opens them to the community as publicly owned lands by the municipality, where they can become centers or magnets for community service. We're setting up a model of access to public site and access to services. So there is a designed proposition that came through the course with actually not only students but professional architects who volunteered with Karim Najjar, and we have part of the funding. The initial budget, of course, doubled given the crisis, and the works have just started there. We hope for this to reach completion and be one of those model collaborative interventions that are participatory and sustainable. I will end by saying I forgot to say that this is here and to circulate it in the room. Did you? This is the report that was produced. It's actually 4 reports. We still have to do the monitoring and indicator report. But we didn't want to go there yet. We wanted really to see how people react to the action plans and who will adopt these different action plans and who should be the custodian. We can circulate. And who should be the custodian, because this project, if without custodianship, will fall apart. This is a long-term incremental project. So I invite you to visit our website to where we will post these different reports and share with you our analysis, our findings, our propositions, and hopefully I will just close by saying I will hopefully call for workshops with interested people, interested donors, public figures, to discuss the action plans and to set them in motion. I'm going to send this paper around. If you're interested in follow-up workshops, please sign up, send us your email, and because I don't want to go to the larger public with those. I will stop here and thank you for listening to me babbling for over, I don't know, an hour. Thank you so much. I would like just to ask the team to stand up and the citizen scientists to be recognized. Please, they did fantastic work. Where are Carmen, the citizen scientist? Please, Karantina people, bravo. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer, but also the team is here and can help me answer you. If the question is tough, I'll turn it to the team. So these 30 action plans are up for adoption. Yes.
I just have, I noticed in one of the slides about how much they pay for rent out of their salary.
Yeah.
Al-Khudr had 280 answers. Senegal had 60 and Saidi had 80. I was just I didn't know how does that work? Is it because Al-Khudr is overpopulated?
Yeah, the densest is Al-Khudr,
Okay.
and the most rental rather than owned.
Okay.
So that's kind of reflective of the
And
situation.
so
on
this
the
is
ground.
based on a specific sample that is representative of
No,
the
we
population,
surveyed
or
all
every
households.
single
We
household?
surveyed all households.
So-
95%, to be
Yeah.
fair.
So 280 were in Khudr, 60 were in Senegal, and 80 were in
Yeah.
Saidi. Wow. Okay. Great work. I'm
Thank
just
you.
looking forward to the workshops.
Thank you. Nahida?
I'm wondering what is the role of the public authority? Is this project will oblige them to respect the whole process, the design, the management, يعني all this strategy لأنه it's a
Yeah.
private initiative. It's from Urban Lab.
It's a
and
research initiative.
Yes. But what about the development?
Yes.
What about the construction drawing,
Yeah.
the permit, the supervision?
Thank you, Nahida. That's why I said that we need custodianship. That's why I didn't proceed to write the monitoring and indicator system, because you need to know who you're monitoring and what indicators you are following. So we need to build through these workshops. I don't think it's one custodianship. In Saida, for example, it was both NGO, community, and the municipality. And I would love for the custodianship umbrella to include, you know, for example, one of the action plans is a neighborhood committee. And I think there's already an initiative to create a neighborhood committee. So with the government, in this case, the governorate and the municipality is an ideal place to go to. And with some people who are active, such as experts and professionals. If we create an advisory group, inside that we created what we call an executive body, people from businesses and from the municipality, from the municipal council, and community members. So there needs to be a setting up of an executive body that oversees and takes custody of this project. But the action plans are designed as independent, right? So each action plan would then have its own actors, you know, funding agencies and public actor. If this is regulatory, then you go to the right. That's why we did a lot of research of who are the stakeholders and who could take the lead as an actor from the public, from the donor, from the community. So we have to break up these action plans to independent increments. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to implement. So you need an umbrella, but you need the action plans to be independent as well. Yes. I hope I answered you, Nahida.
But I want to take the case study of Jeanne d'Arc.
Yes.
Jeanne d'Arc was studied by the neighborhood initiative, okay, in full coordination with the municipality.
Yeah.
When it becomes يعني in the phase of construction, there is no role for in supervision, and there is no authority of the neighborhood initiative, and there were no supervisor on the project. They changed many areas of the شو؟ لا بس سوري رح احكي بالعربي انه كيف فينا نجبر كيف فينا نجبر لأنه
Yes.
بالأخير في عنا في مشاريع كبرى. يعني نحن اليوم عم نحكي عن منطقة.
Nahida, you're absolutely right. That's why the indicator and the monitoring system, which is report 5, which we're going to write after really testing. But instead of taking Jeanne d'Arc, I think the example of the community center is really good because it is a collaboration between the municipality that gave the land and the permission to demolish and reconstruct, the NGO, AUB, and the community, and a local NGOs that will manage and operate the community center long term. So, Karim, if you want to add.
بس بدي زيد شغلة، يعني بنعمل يعني I don't know مين بأي بارت بده يكون في الكونتراكت، يكون في بقلب الكونترا نجبرهم يكون في شراكة من الكوميونيتي ومن الديزاينر ومن
أكيد. You are absolutely right. And each project will be difficult or easy to do with different challenges depending on the project.
Okay, thank you.
Right? So we have projects that are simple about advocacy, and we have projects that are very complicated, like the rehabilitation and reopening of the slaughterhouse. We have projects that have to do with changing the policy of loans to make houses more affordable and can be owned by the long-term tenants. So we have really different types of projects. Each one will have a different set of challenges. I'm not saying it's easy, but we have to start somewhere, and I think the strategic framework, which can be recrafted every time we meet a challenge, should be, I hope, a good alternative. Any other questions?
Who is the NGO?
I can answer.
D4C, Karim can answer.
Your question is very valid and very problematic because we've been through this. We started actually with the DI Lab in collaboration with BUL, where we started with the vision and with the design and with the concept. And of course, once we presented it and it was found the likes of the municipality, it becomes of course more problematic. Then you need to have a professional framework, and the professional framework actually D4C, which is the NGO that I founded in 2018, even that needs a professional registered architect. So the professional it comes down that the professional registered architect has to take the responsibility. In the end of the day, we had to sign a contract with the municipality, but of course it is because we are also part of AUB and we are kind of family or kind of related, brings it together. But otherwise it won't work. Yani, if you would tender this project, there you will have problems if they're not part already from the beginning and part from the
But that's particular to physical projects. We have action plans that have other challenges. Any other questions or comments? تفضل.
Thank you. Hi. I have a question regarding the public space in Karantina. Did you explore with the municipality if someone else operates the space, or an NGO or another committee? Would it solve the issue? You know, there was an issue of conflict, so that it was closed.
We have, thank you so much, because I didn't get a chance to really go through all the action plans. We have 2 action plans in response to your question. One is changing the operation and management system of the public park, the only public park in Karantina which remains closed most of the time. The kids play outside in the street and they cannot access it. So this is one of the action plans, which also require shifting the management, building capacity, changing the resources, and partnering between the municipality and others who can do the job maybe. So the other one is an open space network intervention that really deals with the public realm in Karantina, proposes to demilitarize, open all accessibility points, reconnect it across to Marum Khail, reconnect it to the sea, protect the landscape heritage. There's beautiful landscape heritage in Karantina, trees that are 100 years old, still surviving. This is the biggest, I think, action plan with multiple actions within it: heritage layer, open public space layer, accessibility, transportation through it. So yes, there are 2 action plans at least that respond to the public space and public services in Karantina.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you. تفضل. You
Yes.
can adopt that one if you want.
Thank you
I'm
for
putting my kids up for adoption.
you mentioned that adequate housing was one of the primary requests made from the residents. I was
Yes.
wondering what strategies were adopted for this, if it was from a perspective of increasing income, or if there was a strategy to provide adequate and safe housing without increasing rent.
Yes. I went back to the slide that talks about protecting and expanding existing housing stock. So we have multiple interventions. One, to protect the affordable housing that's there, because really Beirut does not have affordable housing stock except in the peripheral areas, and Karantina is one of those areas that provides it within very close proximity to downtown. So first, you protect the existing stock. Second, you allow people, empower them to own their houses so that you create social anchoring, you avoid displacement and gentrification. Third, you also, there is one project that is proposed as a public-private partnership for the unbuildable lots in one of the large urban blocks as an affordable housing. So it's a development project with a quota of affordable housing within it and with inclusive guidelines. So there are multiple strategies that are here that translate to different action plans to provide adequate, affordable, inclusive housing. And they tackle it from regulation to even legal counseling for tenants, to a housing monitor, to building new projects, to protecting existing stock. So it filters through multiple levels and scales using different tools. Again, I'm just pointing them out. Any other questions before we close or comments? Yes, please.
Yes, good evening. ممكن بس شغلي سؤال عام وسؤال
تفضل، أكيد.
خاص. أول شيء بالنسبة ل مدام الخليل كانت عم تحكي عن جان دارك ستريت. بدي أقول إنه إذا بدك تعملي ليفرج على بلدية بيروت ما في إلا طريقة وحدة. بتعملوا مشروع مع بلدية بيروت لازم بالأساس يكون في اتفاق مع المجلس البلدي والمحافظة مشان تكونوا part of the execution. سوري ما عرفت على حالي، أنا رشيد أشقر، عضو سابق بمجلس بلدية بيروت. ما في عندكم أي طريقة تانية إلا تكون في كونتراكت مع البلدية، ما بتخلوها تشتغل إلا ما يكون في بارتنرشيب مع البلدية تقدر تشتغل. بالنسبة للبروجكت تبعكم، أنا اشتغلت مع مؤسسة فرنسية على الأوربن لاندسكيبينج. نظرتكم هون نظرة ميكرو، عم نحكي عن كارنتينا. أنا ممثل مستشفى كارنتينا كمان، ولا مرة إجا حدا لعنا وسأل أي سؤال بالنسبة للنيبرهود، خصوصا نحن بمنطقة الخضر كمان. بفتكر إنه لازم تروحوا على أكبر من هيك، على ماكرو أبروتش مش ميكرو أبروتش، لأنه اليوم بيروت بعد البلاست منا بيروت قبل البلاست. والابروتش the approach on the city, on the urban planning of the city should be for sure revised. هل عندكم نظرة على ماكرو مش ميكرو؟
Yes, thank you for this question. Again, I presented one project, and as I said, we're working on parallel project. One of the projects is envisioning the city. So it operates. We share the same position around recovery, but we apply it at different scales. My colleagues in the observatory actually document different projects and different actors to understand the dynamics and the governance of the whole process, while I'm working on the neighborhood scale, while other colleagues are working on the city scale with visioning the city. But we're also working in Marum Khail on spatial interventions that are disruptive, such as Al-Masar Al-Akhdar that Mona Fawaz is doing. So yes, we move from one scale to the other, and they inform each other in our internal as well as public exchanges. Mona, تفضلي.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing. Hi. I'll just say that we, in relation to public space and urban mobility, we start with a given plan vert or plan de déplacement doux. And then when we go down on the micro scale, we are translating principles, keeping in mind the implementation of these projects as developed in partnership with the municipality of Beirut and as part of its adopted vision. So the project that Huwaida is referring to, which is the Masar Akhdar, which is something that we are trying to implement, but which is really something that came out of many activist groups in Beirut. It's turning the Fuad Boutros highway into a garden. And so we have been working extremely closely with the municipality, particularly with the governor's office. Every property lot, one by one, you should go claim this percentage, it's yours, روح سجله باسمك. And so actually with the CDR as well, to get information with the municipal council. So certainly you can't work without them, and I agree with you. If you want to implement anything with them, you need to, before you start, have a clear MOU, which is what we're trying to do.
I also want to add that Karantina is somewhat of a special case. It was never part of any large-scale vision for Beirut. It was always excluded. Even the heritage study that I worked with from UNESCO outlined all the impacted areas and excluded Karantina. Many previous studies, I wasn't even part of that study. Many previous studies did not include Karantina. So we felt that this place of multiple traumas, often neglected in the big picture, needs to be seen from the inside out, maybe at least for one shot. And but strategic, I know we didn't show all the details. Strategic frameworks often are thought of the city scale. Some of the action plans are actually city scale action plans. We cannot change the affordable housing law only for Karantina. So I forgot to mention that some of the action plans are city scale and national scale, and others are particular to Karantina. So to add to these three projects and the answer that Mona gave you, the action plans operate at different scales. The open space network is an action plan that connects Karantina to the port, the sea, Marim Khail, and the downtown. So there is an overall city in the background of our thinking, informed by these interventions. So thank you, but for that question, Wafa, tfadal.
هاي أنا عندي بس سؤال إذا يعني عم شوف هالاناليسز والفيجن إن كان كفيجن على سكيل النيبرهود or at the city scale عم في شيء تفكير إنه to adopt أو تقربوا من البلدية اللي هي between bracket إنه authority يعني لازم تكون any strategy or vision at least إنه adopted by this authority لا تكون really إنه مش إنه هذه period هلا في momentum and في donors and everybody is happy and then we are doing a lot of analysis and study and after few times and we go to
absolutely right
نرجع نشتغل مثل قبل يعني بالعكس إنه هذه لحظة مهمة أنا بشوف إنه لازم تربطوا الجهة اللي هي السلطة
صحيح.
على الأرض إنه لحتى تتقبل هالابروش وتحطها مش ترجع تفكر بنفس الطريقة.
البلدية actually واكبتنا throughout the process. Mr. Jihad was supposed to be here today.
لازم يكون في نوع من contract أو memorandum يعني تكون
you are right but we work very closely مع المحافظ ومع البلدية and we are hoping that now that this work was actually completed this afternoon by the way we are hoping to now that we have a proposal to take it to the governor and to say this is a project that you can invest in and take under your wing in a collaborative form and بس مستر جهاد لبقاي من البلدية was informed of the different steps of the project, and he was involved with us on many of the milestones. So definitely what you're saying is extremely important. Without, again, we say this in BUL all the time, we don't want to work in the vacuum or replace the government or allow the NGOization process to take place. That's why I said we want a collaborative effort, because also the government by itself is not doing it. But maybe with this collaborative four-legged proposition, then we can all engage in an experimental approach that is different and maybe more successful than.
سوري إذا بدكم تنجحوا بالمشروع
Yeah.
إذا بدكم تنجحوا بالمشروع اليوم الطريقة الوحيدة اللي ممكن تنجحوا فيه، البلدية اليوم مفلسة، كلنا عارفين إنه الدولة كلها مفلسة، والبلدية ما حتقدر تعمل أي مشروع تطبيقي على الأرض
صح.
إلا ما يكون في فاندينج من برا.
مزبوط.
والفاندينج من برا في صورة من الصور حاطين البارتنرز تبعولكم. البارتنرز تبعولكم يلي هني ممكن يساعدوا للفاندينج، مش فاندينج فور ستاديز، فاندينج فور اكزيكيوشن.
مزبوط.
لازم مثل ما قلت هيديك الساعة يكون في كونتراكت بين الفند ريزنج والفاندينج والدونيترز والبلدية، مشان أي مشروع يكون موجود مع جروب عمل يقدر ينفذ يلي الفيو يلي انحطت إن كان بهالموضوع هيدا أو مع غير بارتنرز.
100%.
وإلا أكيد بيكون شغلكم حرام بس بيبقى على كتب.
I absolutely agree. And that's what we try to do with the community center. The municipalities involved, the funding was brought in by us. And hopefully this experiment will succeed. And I'm actually writing the concept notes as a plea for the different actors to collaborate together, funding agencies, local authorities, and community groups to come together for each, customized for each project.
Dr. Mona, you mentioned CDR, that you're collaborating and coordinating, etc. I wish that you can ask them about the project in 1998. There was a serious study for Karantina to transfer it to a free zone connected directly to the airport, where there was a complete survey for all socio-economic land use, etc. being done. It will be good to know this historical information or data and see how the transformation. Sorry?
Can we see the study?
You have to ask CDR. Okay, you have to ask CDR. And it will be good to see this transformation happen to that location. I am very much impressed with what is presented, but in my opinion, from a macroeconomic level approach to strengthen the, what we call it, affordable housing in that location, where there is other national visions to that being cooked in the lobbies of the ministries and the government, how to make the links or the
we are
stitches
hoping
between both approaches.
We are hoping that these are counter proposals to any kind of takeover of that land and gentrifying it. So we want to keep the people where they are.
Are they the real people? Well, there are so many
what's
successors.
Real people?
No, I mean the real original. I mean original citizen in that location. You know, in the 1998.
For me, everyone who's resided there for a long enough time is an urban citizen who has a right to that site and a right to the city, and I have to protect them.
100%. 100%.
So, but these people, I mean, there are people who we've talked to who claim to have been there 150 years and إجوا كعرب مسلخ وسكنوا هناك, and there are people who are newcomers. But Karantina's beauty is that it played host to so many waves of refugees and hosted them. So I think this is something that I would celebrate myself and encourage, and we need that in a city like Beirut that's diverse.
And last comment, you were talking about demilitarizing that location.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I know. Help me out. تفضلي Mona. I think this would be the last comment because some people are leaving already.
I'm going to use your platform to say in 8 months we're getting hopefully new municipal elections. So vote for people who will do this, not continue to doing what's happening today in the city. You have to vote. Your parents have to vote. Your grandparents have to vote. Vote, 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 vote.
Thank you so much again for coming. Thank you, Karantina, for tolerating us. And really, your feedback is extremely important. I hope you've signed up for our further workshops and meetings so we can build on this effort. Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues in the BUL, for a fantastic ride. Thank you. Bye-bye.